All right, friends. My computer says it's 8 o'clock. Let me check out to make sure I'm live. If anybody's there, let me know if you hear me. All right, friends. Hey, all right. Looks like, at least on my end, things are working. All right. Hello, friends. I didn't put on any lipstick. Whatever. So, apparently, whenever I originally scheduled this, I put it at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock my time, and I only just realized it a few minutes ago. So, my bad. I'm so sorry. And that might have people all kinds of messed up, because if you were counting on YouTube to tell you when it started and it told you a time that was 9 p.m. my time, it might not be the same as 8 p.m. my time. In fact, I'm sure it's not. So, I'm going to give it just a few more minutes while maybe some people catch up with that. And I'm going to say this and then probably cut it out later, but this will all be available afterwards. So even if it's only me, that's fine. We want to get some puppy content. Let me see. There's the puppy. She's not really a puppy. She's 3. Her name is Pearl. And she is like the best dog ever, except we had kind of a problem today. Not kindling her when we left. She should have been fine, but she accidentally stepped on the robot vacuum cleaner and turned it on and scared herself, and it was just a little bit of a mess when we got home, but it's fine. We're all good. All right, I see at least one person's here. Hey, Joey. And it's 8:02, so I'm going to talk just about random things for another couple minutes, and then I'll get started. This is one of my Christmas presents this year from my husband. There. He put our initials in it. It is a tailor clapper, and it's very, very cool. I've used it a few times already and really enjoyed it. Yes, Joey, she is a poodle. She's like a full-blood standard poodle thing. It's kind of a crazy story how we got her. She's 3 years old, and she is just kind of our unofficial therapy dog. She sleeps in my son's room in a kennel in there, the kennel we should have put her in today when we left, and he sleeps 2 hours longer than he, like, consistently since we got her, than he did before, which is amazing. So, anyways, all right, I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump into things. We've got a lot to cover in only about an hour. Hi, Elizabeth. It's nice that you're here. Hey, there's at least 2 friends watching. That's definitely enough. All right, I am going to do this just like last time. I hope. Anytime you can see my face like it is now, then I can read your comments and I can answer your questions and all of that sort of stuff. Anytime when it's me in the corner and what you're mostly seeing is my screen, then I can not see what you're saying, but I'll kind of cover a section, and then I'll take a break and come and check the comments, and we can chat about any questions or any stuff that came up during that, and then we'll do the next section. I have 5 things I want to cover. I have 5 different patterns, or I might have actually chosen to do 4 different patterns. For that, there's links in the description box. Only a couple of them are affiliates for me. Several of the patterns we're using are free or were like $1 this last week. I don't know if they are this week. But anyways, we're going to get into all this and try to cover a few things. I've already got at least one more of these planned out, not scheduled yet or anything, but kind of the topics I want to cover. And I'm also really, really considering, I think it was Joey that suggested this actually, doing like a Zoom class kind of thing. This would be a paid class, and it would be for probably 3 to 5 people in a class, plus me, and we would do it on Zoom, and we'd kind of work on something together. And so I've been putting together some pieces kind of behind the scenes, and just really considering what that would look like and how we would cover topics and things. If you want to weigh in on that, you can go to the Daily Sews and Stuff Friends Facebook group, and there's a poll going on in there. And if you signed up on my website with your email to get newsletters, the very first newsletter came out yesterday, and so you will have seen the link in there and everything. So that was really fun. I don't know how regular those will be because there's a lot going on in my world right now. But I do have a lot of fun doing this Daily Sews and stuff. So whenever I have, my time, that's what I come and do. Hey, Judy. All right, so we've got Ohio and Texas in the house for sure, and I'm not sure where Elizabeth and Joey and anybody else is watching this from, but it is 8:06, and so we definitely need to jump into this whole thing. All right, let's see here. We're going to start with cutting markers. So whenever you project something like this dress that is one very long dress, it's hard to cut it all in one go with most people's setups. Most people don't have a, let's see, let's do this document setup. I should have done this before. Let's switch that to inches really fast. All right. This page is roughly 45 inches. Most people don't have 45 inches of length on a mat to cut. Some of you might. You might have like a 36 by 48 mat, which is awesome, and I envy you. But from what I see on the group, this is a little bit of conjecture, but from what I see in the Projectors for Sewing group, most people have the size mat that I do, which is 24 by 36. Some have some bigger, some have some smaller, but that seems to be pretty common. So within that, if you have to cut out a dress that is 45 inches long, how do you do that? And you've only got 36 inches to work with. Let me preface this by saying there is a lot I would do to this pattern to make it more projector friendly. I would kind of shift it and turn it, and there's things that I would do. I would probably keep this one on the fold and cut the dress on the fold, the sleeve mirrored, and then I'd probably move the neckband to be on the fold where the dress is and cut that all in one go with my fabric doubled. But there's a lot of other things I would do to this dress to make it more projector friendly. With it kind of shoved over here to the side, it would be really hard to line that up well on your mat. That's kind of a sidebar. What we're talking about is how would you know where to stop cutting and where to start cutting again if you had to shift this fabric. Now, if you're completely lost and have no clue what I'm talking about, there is a video that I made called Help My Pattern Piece Doesn't Fit Fabric Shifting, I think. Something very similar to that. And it's a really short video. It's less than 10 minutes long, where I show you that when your pattern piece is too long to fit on your screen at one time, that what you can do is use Adobe and put a fabric marker with a line or whatever on your pattern, and then you can mark it with either a marking pin or an actual, they're not sitting there right now, but an actual pin like a sewing pin, and then you can move both the fabric and the pattern on your screen in order to be at the same spot and keep cutting. If that made no sense at all, watch that video. I promise it'll make more sense. But if that's something you're going to have to do every single time, and you've got it in Affinity Designer anyways, because you're going to be rearranging this on the screen to make it make more sense, then you could just add it in Affinity Designer. Now, this particular dress has the lengthen line, which is probably what I would use, but let's pretend like it doesn't. Oops, why did you not delete? Oh, because it's grouped, I'm sure. Alright, whatever. You just be there then if you want to be. So how would I add a marker to this dress? So this will not save onto the PDF, so don't just do this one thing and be done. But one thing you can do to kind of give yourself a visual reference is if you kind of grab up here in the ruler and pull down, you'll get this little blue line, and you can give yourself kind of a reference point. And so right there I could be like, okay, that's where the waistline is. And if I were doing some lengthening or shortening without a lengthen shorten line, then I would be skipping ahead to the very last thing that we're talking about. But I would use this too. So I would kind of maybe use this as a reference mark. And then I could do something like, where is it? I could use the pen tool. And I could make a click. And maybe I want the line to stick out further. That way, you know, it's clearly a reference line and not a cut here line. And I would put a little click there. And then I would push the shift key, which would see how it's following straight across. Even though my mouse is way down here, that yellow line is following straight across that blue line. Holding down the shift key will make it straight. And so I'll go out to here and I'll click again. And then if I keep going, it's going to try to add more nodes to this. So I'm going to hit enter, which will sort of end it. And then I'm going to click the move tool so we're not making new lines. And then I have a line there. And I can do, you know, that's my reference point. And I can know that I will put little pins there whenever I'm cutting to help me shift my fabric or mark it with a marker or whatever. If you want to make sure that that line is something big and bold, and you definitely see, you go over here in this right hand, I'm going to say panel, in this right hand panel, and you click stroke. And right now that line is tiny. It's like a quarter of a point. So I'm going to click it, and I'm going to write 5, and that'll give me a 5-point line. And that's a pretty thick line. Here, let's get rid of this guy. So to get rid of these guys, you just drag it off your screen. Okay. Let's zoom in a little bit. So that's a pretty thick line. And I might decide, you know what, that's too thick. I'm not going to be able to line it up accurately because it's too thick. I could take it down to 3 points. And then I could be like, well, I can't even see that. So I could take it up to 9 points. Whatever. You can type in whatever thickness you want there. You can also, if you were really afraid that you would think this was a cutting line, you could do something like change it to a dashed line. I know you do it here, but I can't remember what you do. Oh, you can put an arrow on it, first of all. And then you can adjust if it's going to be dashed with this miter thing. So I could do, like, if I click 1 instead of 1.5, or if I click 5 instead, that changes how it works. All right. I'm pretty sure you can change the style of that somewhere in there too. Anyways, this is how I would add a cutting marker. It's super simple, just to add that this way. There is nothing wrong with doing it in Adobe either. I kind of feel like if you already have this open, then why not do it here? But if you're not adjusting it at all, doing it in Adobe is just fine. All right, let's switch back. All right. Hey, another Texan in the house. All right, anybody have any questions about, I mean, that's a really simple one, but if you have some sort of question about my insane description at the beginning or anything, I'm happy to answer that. And then we'll move on to the next topic. Let's move on. I'm just going to well, you know what? As soon as I close that, I'm going to want to come back to it later. So I'm just going to move to the next one. All right, this is another one that I would definitely do a lot of work to if I were going to project it. And this is the Little Lizard King Napa, and I actually have used this one a ton. I love this pattern on my 4-year-old. And my 5-year-old too. But something about my 4-year-old and just her, she's not as much of a dressy girl as my older one is. And this is just so cute on her, and she loves wearing them. And I really like matching it with the Sinclair top because those straps are just easier to sew. Little tip there. Anyway, it also matches super well with things like the London top, and I'm totally getting distracted. I've made a lot of these for my daughter, though, and honestly, I have just cut it from this, but it's easier to adjust it now that I know how to use Affinity, and I would probably just adjust it once and then be able to keep using it. Now, something that happened whenever I ran this through PDF Stitcher, let me make a side note here. Run your stuff through PDF Stitcher before you open it in Affinity Designer. I went over that in the last video, and I'm not going to do it again today, but that will help you be able to manipulate it because it will unlock the pattern. Designers lock their patterns because they want to keep them safe, and I fully support that. I do not want people using what I'm doing here to rip people off. Please don't do that. I buy these designers' patterns because I like them and I want to support them. And the reason I adjust my patterns in this program is so that they are more user-friendly for me, and so they're more adjusted to my body or my kids' bodies. But in no way am I doing it to steal their design. And I would be absolutely heartbroken if somebody took the information I was giving them and did that. That's just shame on you if that's what you're doing. But I distracted myself with that. I was making a point before that, and I've forgotten what it was. I'll go look at the chat in a minute and probably remember. Anyway, the reason I have this pattern open right now, other than it is a super cute pattern and I love it, is that the layers, this is the AO instead of the Projector file, or it might be one of their early renditions of a Projector file, which they have greatly improved but weren't great at the beginning. And there's really no layers here. And it can be a really giant pain to cut this. And in fact, I used to, that's what I was saying, run things through PDF Stitcher to unlock it so that you can adjust it. Because designers lock it for a reason, to keep their pattern safe. And I fully support that and understand that. But in the way that we're sewing now, using our projectors, we need to have digital access to them. That's what I was saying. Okay. So, what I used to do is run it through PDF Stitcher and stitch it together and be able to layer it that way. Because this was an AO and it doesn't have layers. Or maybe it just doesn't work right. I don't remember what happened with that. I'm going to use this to show you how to delete layers, though, because that's what it says up there on my cheat sheet notes. So, you could go through and delete each thing. Like right here, that's just like one line. I could delete one line at a time. That's kind of a pain. What I could do instead was either one, I can just uncheck that layer and it will not show. And whenever I export it, I can tell it not to export the unchecked layers. Or what I usually would do is I will just click that layer right there and then hit delete on my keyboard. And then that entire layer and everything in it is gone. So, well, I just deleted the name of that instead. There we go. Now we've deleted size that, delete that, delete that. We'll keep the size 5 and delete the size 4. We'll keep the 3 and delete the 2 and 18 and 12. And then be like, all right, well, I don't know what's happening now. Huh. Alright, well, anyways, at this point I should have 2 layers, but I only have 1. And oh, it's because that one is really hard to see. Alright, I have 2 layers, and I could do any sort of adjusting I needed to do. And then I would 100%, if I hadn't done this in PDF Stitcher for some reason, I would grab that layer, the entire layer, and I would go over here and tell it to make that line solid and a 5-point line, and then, hey, I can see it now. So yeah, then I could adjust this for grading. I could, mirror that and cut it flat, whatever it is that I was wanting to do. All right, so that was deleting layers. I feel like I messed up somewhere, because that should not have been what I wanted to do with that. That one should have been grading, because here I was talking about how to delete layers when there's not any layers. All right, and it says delete layers / grading. Clearly I made notes for myself and I don't even know what they mean, but I'm going to show you how to grade in this. We covered a little bit of grading in the last one, and I'll cover a little bit more here, and then if there's still questions, maybe I can kind of do a video more dedicated to that. I think the first thing is you have to understand grading and why you grade and how you grade. For my children, not for me, but for my children, they are generally taller than they are wide. My son actually has pretty broad shoulders, so his shoulders and his height usually match pretty close. The rest, maybe not. But my girls are fairly consistently 2 sizes taller than wide. And so I'm usually grading for them to keep the height but reduce the width. And so you have to think about how are they tall? How does that sizing work together? If we look at the arm side over here, in this front bodice, you can see that the arm size is longer on the bigger size than it is on the smaller size. And even though I want to reduce the overall width of the front piece, because my girly is not that wide, I want to make sure she has the arm side length of the taller piece, because her arms are still as tall as, in this case, a 5-year-old, as a size 5, even if her body's not as wide. So it's not just about the length from head to toe, but it's all these different little lengths in between. Kind of the same thing with the neckline. I would probably generally keep the neckline width of that size 5, because she still has some width. She's just like side to side. It's just front to back that she doesn't have as much depth as some children do. So I would probably keep some of that and just cut down the width from the center a little bit here. So let me show you a little bit what I mean. I don't want to lose a ton of the width of the neckline, and I don't want to lose any of that arm side. So actually the first thing I'm going to do is kind of start grouping my piece together so it functions as one piece. Right now you can see when I use that node tool, only that one line selects. If I select here, only that line selects. So if I use the shift key and select both of them, then I can highlight those nodes right there and join those curves. Let me just say, if you have questions about grading, I'm probably not the person to ask, because I sort of understand how to do it for my kids, but not necessarily for others. But if you find someone who is teaching how to do it on paper, learn how they do it. Learn the concept behind it. Learn why you might grade, here or there or whatever, and then just apply it to how we do things in Affinity Designer. Easier said than done, absolutely. But that was something I was reading the Ahead of the Curve. And that was kind of something that struck me when I was reading that, of you know, I need to learn these techniques, and I might even learn them on paper, just so I can really understand them. But then I can take that and translate that into how I do things on the computer. That's a bit of a side note. Okay.
Sorry, I missed something. Can you...
And apparently Alexa thinks I'm talking to her, but I'm not. I don't know how to turn you off. Stop, lady. All right. Whew, that was exciting. All right, so I have this pattern piece right here, and I have all of this put together. Oh, I didn't get the neck yet, did I? Nope. All right, I'm going to put the neck together with it. And now I have one solid piece, except for this fold line, I think. Yep. All right. So I just moved it, and oh no, no big deal. I'm going to hit Control Z and go back. So what I'm going to do is, with this piece highlighted, selected, I'm going to, again, hold down the Shift key because that makes things straight, and scoot it over until it lines up on the side there. And there I can keep a lot of that kind of width. That shoulder is still the same width. That arm side is still the same length. And my height is still the same. But over here, I lost some of the neckline a little bit. So one thing I can do is go back to the node tool, and I can kind of scoot this in. And if you see how it altered the shape there, it just gave me a little bit deeper neckline. And that may or may not be what I want to do. And you can kind of play with that. You can also maybe take that neckline. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Take that neckline and, oh, you have to have the move tool, Brandon. And kind of compare it and see how that compares. And right here you can see, like, those shoulders really are the same width. So maybe I don't need to fuss about keeping the shoulders the same width. And maybe if I alter the arm side a little bit, it wouldn't be the end of the world. With this pattern, it definitely would not be. If you are doing a sleeved pattern, then you really want to keep the arm side the same so that the sleeve still fits in the arm side, right? Okay. So I can just delete that blue side, or sorry, purple sides now, and I'm left with the blue sides. And if I want to go ahead and bring that back in, I can. I can go back and join these guys too. So now it will be one solid piece, and that would be ready to be cut. Now, right here, this is really very, very, very minutely different in height. So really what I would do is I would just delete the wider one and keep the narrower one. And that would be problem solved with that one. So again, the pocket doesn't really matter. I'm just going to delete one or the other and call it good. I'll give her the bigger pockets. It's not a huge amount of difference there. I could get my seam allowance wrong and have the same size there. And then on the bottoms, so this is a super loose pant with a very deep crotch. So it doesn't super matter. But again, you kind of want to keep that crotch curve, because they're, if you're thinking about like the crotch depth, that's still going to be the same. It's just, or I guess the crotch length is still going to be the same. It's the crotch depth that might not be the same. And so you want to make sure that they still have the length there so they don't get a wedgie. So again, in this pattern, it's a really deep one, so it doesn't matter too much, but that would mean that I wouldn't want to lower this at all. I would want to make sure that as I moved things over, I was keeping everything the same over here. And so honestly, what I would do right now is I'm using the Shift key to keep everything kind of level. And so because these are curved lines, it's hard to know when I'm lining up in the right spot. So I'm going to do like I did a minute ago and go over here to the ruler, grab a line, and come and intersect it right here where that purple intersection is. You see that? Where the purple lines meet? Or I guess they don't really meet. They have a corner. So now that that guideline is there, I can move this blue line so that it intersects at that same width. Did that make sense? I hope so. And then I can just drag this off to get rid of it. And then I can make this line shorter to match that. And then if I go down here, probably on a pattern like this, excuse me, even though she has tiny little legs, I would just cut it at the blue because that's what it is. Actually, one thing I would do differently is I would use the node tool and kind of shift things a bit here. Using that shift key. That was unintentionally funny. And make sure I kept some of that ankle width, just because, again, her feet still have to fit through there. Just because she's skinny doesn't mean that her feet are necessarily significantly smaller, and they still need to fit through the bottom of the pants. So by using the node tools, it altered the curve of that line a little bit too. And so it's still one nice smooth curve, but she still gets a little bit of that ankle room still, so that the pants, her feet fit through the pants. And so anyway, I might just cut on that blue line and not really worry about the fact that the pants were a little bit wider, because they're a loose flowy pant and doesn't really matter. A legging is kind of a better way to show you this, if we really want to get into the nitty gritty of it. But it's already 8:30, and so we do not today. All right, I'm going to go back and check on you guys because I feel like there was a lot of crazy in that one. Yes, length would be the same. So let's go back and pretend like, let me just undo a bunch of stuff. Well, let me scroll up where I started. Control Z, guys. It is your best friend. If you learn nothing else from this video, learn that. All right. So now I actually want to redo that last thing. Control Shift Z, and it'll come back. All right. So if I had a kiddo who was wider than they were tall, and I wanted to get the width of the blue but the height of the purple, I would do basically the same thing in reverse. I want to show you something really fast. This is an absolutely do not do this thing. If I just drag this wider, I mean, to be honest, it might actually work in this case. Very rarely does it actually work. And this would definitely alter the arm side, which if this had a set-in sleeve would be a big deal. That's really funny that I was like, this isn't going to work, and then it sort of did. Anyway, just dragging it bigger shouldn't work. It shouldn't be how you change the size of things. You want to actually get in and use the little node guys and get things changed. So funny that the blue one was all separate and the purple one is completely together, but that's fine. We appear to have an interruption. Yes?
The iPad died, but I need you to not get it in.
Okay, well, you need to plug it in and leave it plugged in like I told you.
It is plugged in.
Okay, I'll be there in a minute then. Okay, so we'll have to, it's just funny that they're separate like this, or together like this, but we can separate them, no big deal. So if we want to move the, let's see. So first I'm going to, this red guy tells me, first I'm going to recenter because of that interruption. Oh, all right. This red guy tells me that is an end node. If we grabbed that and dragged it, they would be separate right there. So I don't need to separate anything there. And I'll go down here to this guy, and I'll tell it to break the curve there. And now my arm side is its own separate piece. No, it's not. There, yes it is. Okay, my arm side is its own separate piece, so we could scoot that out here to the width of the blue line. And then we would have to take, where are you? We'd have to take this guy out there. Nope. And then we could theoretically make the shoulders wider. That would work on some patterns. But what I would probably do with this one is I'd break it right there. I would shift the shoulder over to keep that the same. And then I would draw this one out till it was the same. And then I would take this node right here and I would just move it. And it would alter my neckline just a little bit wider. You see how it went a little wider? If your kiddo is wide this way, that works. If your kiddo has more depth than width, you might need to keep fussing with that until it's right. But that is what I would do. Hold on, well, I'll just delete it real fast. Delete that. Okay, so now it is that wider piece rather than taller. All right, let's move on to what you would do. Actually, let me double check and make sure everybody's happy. Yeah? Grab a drink of water for a second. All right, let's do the next thing. So this is an AO file. Now, this has a projector file. The projector file is the first one we went to. So I'm not throwing this designer under the bus for this. But if you come across a pattern that does not have a projector file, you can theoretically use the AO file. However, a lot of times AOs don't have layers. So you can't run it through PDF Stitcher and have it take out the layers you don't want. What do you do at that point? Now, solution number one in my book would be to put together the pattern in PDF Stitcher, because usually the letter or the AO size that you would put together in PDF Stitcher does have layers, and you could delete them that way. But if for some reason that's not an option, or if you would just rather do it this way, you can do it this way. So we're going to start by ungrouping what did I just do? All right, we're going to start by ungrouping things if we need to. Right here, it looks like it's grouped each size as a curve. And if I go over here in this layers guy, this is a pretty powerful thing to see. And you probably want to play around with this a little bit. You can collapse the layers. You can turn individual things within the layers on and off. I don't know if you can see that because I don't know where that particular thing is. But we can leave this highlighted right here. And even though we don't know what that is, we can go over to stroke and we can tell it to make it 20. Oh, and it's that right there. See, it just made that line way thick right there. So it's pretty cool how you can use this to find things. And depending on how a designer might have it labeled, I mean, it just depends on the pattern too. You can see something. So we could go through and start like just unchecking these, and that might be helpful. You could also use this to start deleting things. You can delete straight from over here in this guy. But as you can see, a lot of times a curve, like this curve right here, that's one entire piece. That's one entire piece. But they're not always like that. Sometimes a pattern will have very broken lines, like in that Napa where one size was actually a full line put together and then the other size was all broken apart. So if it's all broken apart, you're going to end up deleting a lot of things. What I would do is I would go find the size I want, and let's say it's this one. I'm gonna go for this red one right here. All right. And so I would grab that. It's highlighted. I've got the entire piece. I can see I've got the entire piece. And I'm going to hit Control C. And that's going to copy it. And then I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to collapse this so that I can see to work. And I am going to tell it right here to add a layer. I'm going to call this layer my size because I have no idea what size I actually just grabbed. And then while this is highlighted, while this is blue, I'm going to hit Control V to paste. And now this one, which we're going to make size 20 so we can definitely see it, this one is now on its own layer. So I can turn off all those layers. And only see the size I wanted. And then I could honestly like delete that whole layer and only see the size that I wanted. Just a minute, bud. Obviously I would have to do that with each piece, but a pattern like this, which has a lot of layers but not a lot of pieces, it would be much easier to do it that way. So I'm going to copy it from, and I'm scrolling over here, I'm going to copy it from that and I'm going to paste it into that. And then I got to grab the other pieces. I'm just gonna make them 20 each time. That's a little bit ridiculously big, but it will help me see them for this. And I mean, I honestly might do it just like that. Have it ridiculously big and then bring it back down in a minute once the other's deleted. That would be completely fine. Do we want to get the other size of that dress? Sure. Let's do that. Make those 20. Oh, that's not the right one. See, good thing I did it like that. There it is. That guy. Is that the right one? Sorry. No, that's the one that we already have. Alright, so... You know what I'm going to do? Nope, see, that's 20, so we know it's that one. So let's scoot it over, and then we can grab that guy. There we go. So we're going to make that guy 20, and we're going to copy, and we're going to go all over here. We got to scroll all the way up, put it into the My Size layer, and then I can go ahead and move this guy until they're on top of each other again. And then the neckline, honestly, well, it's going to be easier over here. There we go. Sometimes these are not full rectangles. They make one rectangle, the biggest size, and then they do the little guys, which can be frustrating. But you can always use the node tool to put it back together. All right, so I've got my size here. I'm going to scroll out so I can definitely see what happens as I do this. Come on, there we go. And I'm going to take layer 1 and I'm going to delete it. And oh look, I really am left with the size that I need. And then right here, everything in layer 1, I don't actually want it to be that 20 point line. I want it to be a 5-point line. So right there, I'm just going to tell it to be a 5-point line. And the style was already selected right there. And so it made it a straight, solid 20 or 5-point line. And this pattern could be ready to go. If you wanted all of the words and everything, you would just do the same thing. I just undid a bunch of stuff so I could see. If you needed the words, just highlight them all. Hey, little man. And copy and paste them the same way into the other layer that's your size. And then delete the big thing that's no longer important to you. All right. That was three of the 5 topics I wanted to cover tonight. I guess it was 6 because that one we talked about 2 different things. I am going to go help him with technology for 2 seconds and be right back. And we'll see how quickly we can cover those last couple things.
No, why do you have a yarn in there for attached?
No.
What is a yarn for? Oh.
sister, you coming back?
What time that
People are waiting for me. I will talk to you in a minute. Whew, really sorry. All right. Mom duty definitely called. I believe I've answered all the questions. There's none right now. Probably lost a lot of you just now with all the crazy that just happened. But that's okay. This will get edited and put back up in a minute. Whew. And the dog followed me, but now she's back. We, if my other Texan is still here, she can attest to this. We had crazy weather there yesterday. And yesterday afternoon, the feels like temperature between the very north of Texas and the Panhandle and the very south of Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, the difference in the feels like heat was 102 degrees. It was like negative something up there and almost 90 down there. It's crazy, and it got cold super fast overnight. And this room is not well insulated. And I've got my little space heater going right here, and it's making me really thirsty. Drying me out. All right. There's my deep breath. Hopefully things are still going. I am going to jump back over. What's that? No, I'm not. There we go. All right, I'm going to jump back over right here. Let me see, actually. Okay. All right, this pattern kind of hurts my eyes to look at right this minute. There are so many options for it, and it's so jam-packed in here because it's an AO file, not a projector file. It makes me a little bit crazy. But it's actually one of my favorite patterns. A lot of my shirts are this Riviera Raglan that I wear pretty consistently. But what I usually do, because it has so many options, and that's kind of the thing, like I love buying a pattern that has a ton of options because I feel like I get so much bang for my buck, but then it can be overwhelming to choose between the options. And so what's really cool about doing this pattern adjusting on Affinity Designer is I can basically delete the things I don't want and I can keep the things I do want. Like the other day I did, for probably the 30th time, a pattern adjustment to the peg legs add-ons, and but this one I was doing for my own sewing, and what I did was deleted the pieces I didn't want. Like I didn't want the color block side seam, and I didn't want the gusset, so I just deleted those pieces off, and I renamed it something like plain pocket peg leg add-ons or something like that, that will trigger me in the future what it is. And so then if I want to make one that's color blocked, I would just title it something like peg leg add-on color block side, something like that, to keep it straight on where it's saved. And that does mean that there's a lot of files to go through in my folder, but then it means that whenever I open it to cut it, all I'm looking at are the pieces that I actually want to cut. Okay. One of my problems with this pattern, though, as much as I love this pattern, once I kind of get it pared down to what I want, are the notches. Now, I love a good notch. I really love sewing a pattern that has excellent notches that line up beautifully and tell me exactly where to put things. And as I'm sewing, I'm making sure they're lined up and I don't have to think about it too much. I really hate cutting notches. And in fact, I posted about that in the Projectors for Sewing group the other day because I really hate cutting notches. And they told me to use a pattern notcher, which I do have because at one point I thought I would design patterns not to sell, but to fit my own body. And then somehow I fell into this projector rabbit hole instead, and that's where all my learning has been focused. But I did buy the pattern notcher when I first started getting into that pattern drafting. And in my brain, it was only for paper, but I started using it on the fabric, and it doesn't work perfectly, especially on knit, but it does work. enough that you can tell that that's where you meant to put a notch. And so that's what I've been doing, and I like that a lot. So I'll sort of just mark it with a friction pin or a white Crayola pencil, colored pencil, is what I usually mark with, and then that only marks the one side if you're cutting folded or if it's doubled or whatever. So then I'll use the pattern notcher to make sure it's all marked all the way around. That was a sidebar to say that you still want to have your notches well marked. And with this pattern in particular, and this is not to say only this pattern, there's a lot of patterns like this. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup things until I can get to what I want. This pattern in particular, I can adjust the width of that line all I want to, but that didn't change my notches, because my notches are not lines, they are shapes. And I find these notches kind of hard to see when I'm cutting. So I could make my notch bigger. And as you can see, it's kind of a funny shaped triangle, and when I made it bigger, it scooted it off of where it was, and I don't really like that. I can make it bigger that way, but that doesn't really work either. But I can also use the node tool, and using the node tool, I can make that a lot more visible. I may not want to cut it quite that deep, but I can definitely see that without distorting where it is. Or if I really didn't want it to show a lot deeper, but I wanted to just kind of make sure I noticed it, I could maybe skew it in that shape. I could also take it with the move tool, and I could flip it, and I would flip it both vertically and horizontally, and I don't understand why that's how you have to do it, but you do. And then I would move it, you know, vertically and horizontally. I was just doing that with the keyboard, but I can also do that with, you know, just dragging it. And then here with this, I'll show you with this one. You could also rotate it and then move it. Whatever works for you. And then that would be on the outside of the line if you wanted to maybe cut those notches outwardly. Or if you were like, you know what I really want is just that line that goes in so that I can cut it. Let me undo a bunch of the stuff I just did. Alright, so we're saying we want to just have a straight line in. And what we're going to want to keep is that node. That node is exactly where we want it. We can move this node. I'm holding down that shift key. And then I'm going to do this one too. And that would make it a straight line. And that could be the straight line that we would notch into if we wanted to. We could also decide that what we don't like that it's a triangle shape. We want it to be a line that we can attach permanently to our pattern piece. If for some reason that's what we want to do. So we could grab that pin tool, and we could, actually let's start here. Start right there, right at the tip of that. And then I'm going to use the shift key that brings out that yellow line that tells me I'm going straight. I'm going to go right there. And then I would go over, first of all, here and make that wide. And then I would go over, and let's say I want to make it the same color as this line. And I can just use this little eyedrop tool. Eyedrop is not the right word. Dropper tool to grab that color. And it would be the same. And then I could delete that triangle, and I would just have a little notch there. So there's some different ways I figured out to play around with notches and make them just a little bit more visible whenever you're cutting, so that you don't just fly right on past them, which is a lot of times what I end up doing, cutting, and then I kick myself later because when I'm sewing, I really want it. We're going to talk a little bit more. We have one more thing to cover. I'm just going to... No, I don't want to save anything. That is my alarm that says we should start wrapping things up. But I do have one more topic I want to cover. Which was the pattern tetris, which is what I kind of teased with. And also some height adjustments. I kind of feel like, though, that is not something I want to shortchange. So, you guys weigh in. Do you want me to spend just a tiny bit trying to cover those, or do you want to wait for another video? There's a delay too, so it takes a while sometimes for you guys to start responding. So that alarm is the alarm that it's time to take my son to bed. I can definitely let him stay up a little bit later. We homeschool. Not a big deal if he's sleeping a little bit later in the morning. But I've already catch y'all for an hour now. So alright, I'm not seeing any opinions, so I'm going to make an executive decision. I am going to save those for next time. I really want to cover them, but I really want to do them justice. And I hate that I teased with it and said that I was going to do a pattern Tetris, and now I'm not. But I feel like if I just jump through it super fast, that doesn't really do it justice. I do have about 5 minutes though, so I will. Alright, most people are saying waiting. So I have like 5 more minutes of what I want to do, so I'm gonna go just show a little bit of the pattern Tetris and not cover lengthening or shortening at all. Basically what I do is I reduce the pattern down just like I was talking about before. You know, delete all of the pieces I don't need, where I'm only looking at the size and number of pieces, number of pieces that I actually need. And then I would start putting, the reason I chose this pattern to show this was, this is supposed to be a color blocked pattern. So I would arrange them then by which color they are. And I would think about too my pattern and think about think about my fabric and think about if it was directional at all. And so then I would have them sort of arranged and ready to go. And then I would go measure my fabric, and I would make a rectangle the size of my fabric. And that is in points because I didn't fix it earlier. So let's just pretend whatever that is right there is the size of my fabric. And then I would just start taking the pieces. And so what you can do whenever you've kind of altered them and gotten them done, you can group them together. But if you haven't done that, you can just highlight the whole piece by dragging the little arrow tool around. And you've got the whole piece there. And you can move them around on your rectangle to make them fit. And then, you know, since that's the same size as your fabric, whenever you go to project, you can kind of line that fabric or that rectangle up with your fabric, and you can cut, and you'll be confident that it'll fit because you've already done the math beforehand. So we will definitely talk about that in a lot more detail in a couple weeks, and we'll definitely talk about the height adjustments then too. So thank you, Judy. Yes, my son does need to go to bed. And that is 8:59 right on the nose. So probably for you guys, it's already at 9 because of that delay. So I'm going to hang around for just 5 more minutes. Any other questions or comments or anything you guys want to talk about, we can spend about 5 minutes doing that. And then I will go get bedtime started. I quite often overestimate what I can get done in a short amount of time, and I don't know if that's like a time blindness thing or an optimistic thing, but I also kind of got off topic and talked about some other stuff at the very beginning. So thank you all for joining. I will definitely do another class because we have to cover that lengthening and shortening and pattern tetris. And I have a whole note on my phone with other ideas I want to cover. So I will plan in about 2 weeks, just like we did before, probably about 2 weeks from today, about the same time, about the same place. Hopefully I will get it correct in YouTube next time, the first go round. And we can do this again, and we'll make sure that we cover at least those 2 things, if not a few things more. So I sort of talked about this at the beginning. Let me kind of plug it again a little bit. I'm going to work through this whole list of Affinity Designer questions that I have, and definitely not going to hold out on you guys. But if you are interested in a kind of more in-depth Zoom type lesson, I don't know that it will necessarily be Zoom. I need to really figure that out. But where we can interact face-to-face and that sort of thing. If you guys are interested in that, I am going to... I guess I'm currently doing market research. That sounds fancy. To see if that's kind of a feasible thing. And not just you guys, but also kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff and figuring out how I would do that. And with that, I would kind of get a mock pattern that we could really, really work with and all have the same pattern to work with, and kind of do some things that way. And then it could also be, you know, if you guys shared your screen and you had some specific questions, maybe we could work through some problems with that. So we will see how all of that goes. If you guys want to weigh in on that, there's a poll going on right now in the Daily Sews and Stuff Friends Facebook group, or you can leave it in the comments here. I will totally read those too. I also want to say, the other night on the Projectors for Sewing group, there was a person whose name I've already forgotten, and I'm so sorry, because we ended up messaging back and forth, and she was so sweet. She was a fellow homeschool mom. We came across a problem where a pattern piece was a rectangle, not a line. And so anytime she tried to, and it was like 2 rectangles stacked on top of each other. And so when she went to try to change the nodes, it would make a funny, not really a trapezoid, it would just like drag out one side of the shape. And it wasn't until I zoomed way in on those nodes that I finally realized what was going on. So we're definitely going to have a lesson about that and how we figured that out, and how to deal with that in the future. Joey, I've done quite a few things with them personally. I just haven't done any videoing of it, other than a really horrible one that I tried to go live on Facebook, and Facebook did not cooperate over on my Facebook page. So the Epson pins is what she was asking about. And once I started really getting into Affinity Designer, I don't use them as much anymore. I used them more whenever I was kind of editing on the fly with Adobe while I was cutting. Now that I've really dived into getting everything right in Affinity before I start projecting, I don't use them quite as often. But there was a pattern, a paper pattern that I wanted to use, that I used my Epson pen and Affinity Designer and projected Affinity Designer onto my table and traced it around with that. So we might eventually get to the point where I do a video on that. That would be a little bit harder because I would need to have it projected, or have the camera over there where it was projected. It would be a lot. These sharing my screen is really easy to record. That gets a lot more complicated. So we'll have to see how that all goes down. All right, thank you all so much for joining me. It is 9:04 according to my computer, so this seems like the perfect time to wrap things up. Subscribe, stick around. We'll do this again in a couple of weeks, and I will see you guys over in the Projectors for Sewing group and in my Facebook group and wherever else that we interact. Leave your comments, leave your questions, and I will add things to to my list if you have any suggestions. And I just heard a very frustrated sound from my son, so I'm definitely going now. Bye, friends.